Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar, your host. We're going to talk about the Nuggets today. So joining us is our lead Nuggets writer for Mile High Sports, the host of the terrific Pickaxe and Roll podcast, Ryan Blackburn. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't, you get a chance to see Ryan, of course, on the program regularly, but going to sit in today. We'll do a full hour. We'll touch base on the Denver Nuggets, try to figure out what may be ailing them or what they might be able to do better. The Nuggets are 14-10, which sort of depends on the way you look at it, right? They're 2.5 games out of second. They're 2 games out of being out of the playoffs entirely, including the play-in. So the situation for the Nuggets is really fascinating. Glad you had an opportunity to join us. If you haven't had a chance to check out the Pickaxe and Roll podcast, you really want to do so wherever you get your podcast. Really proud to have it as part of our Mile High Sports podcast network. And the writing, of course, terrific. Nobody covers the Nuggets better. The minutes chart that Ryan has put together for years, I read that like some people get to the New York Times crossword puzzle. I mean, I dig into that right off the bat, so it's good to have. And it allows us to look at a little bit that we'll have to talk about is the way that Michael Malone's staggering minutes, and that has to do a lot of the time with Jamal Murray. And so Jamal Murray, after hitting the game-winning jumper earlier this week against the Kings, the sort of social media world surrounding the Nuggets is that Jamal Murray is back. And you heard it left and right. Jamal Murray is absolutely back. Of course, we heard this little bit before too. Is Jamal Murray really actually back? And what does Jamal Murray back mean? Because a lot of Jamal Murray's career reputation is based on his playoff performances, not his regular season.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating discussion. I can't necessarily say that he's back but I also can't necessarily say that he ever left, right? Because the beginning of the season has never been a great time for Jamal Murray. He has always started the year slow. This year looked a little different. It felt a little bit different, obviously. And there's some concerns, obviously, with the Nuggets and where like the faith that they have to put in Jamal on a consistent basis, the contract that they gave to him, the expectations have obviously risen, and you're expecting him to show up a little bit more consistently over the course of an entire season, as opposed to just that 15 games that they need him in the playoffs. They need him on a more consistent basis. This year has proven that they need him on a more consistent basis. And to me, the Nuggets, they have really looked like a team that needs a second score. They've got Jokic, who is averaging over 30 a game. He's been tremendous, obviously, for the entire
expectation
season.
Is that would be Jamal Murray. I mean, we can talk about Michael Porter Jr. as well, but he was really considered to be maybe if everything hit right, the third leading scorer on the team, which, by the way, he is. So, but it is Jamal Murray that was expected to maybe elevate him, with Jokic being the 30-plus. The thought is that maybe Murray would be in that 24, 25-point range, if a little bit short of that, and that would be a big difference maker for the Nuggets. That would be something that, for Murray at least, would essentially be unprecedented in the regular season.
I mean, that would be great if you're getting 24 points per game from Jamal. That would be dope. The problem is that Jamal's only ever averaged at most 21 points per game. And they have never been able to fully unlock him during the regular season. Like, there have been these peaks. There have been these moments during the regular season where, hey, man, Jamal looks great. He put up 50. He hasn't put up 30 in a game this season so far. And that, to me, is pretty scary. That to me shows there's just a little bit less explosiveness. There's a little bit less ability to get to the spots that he's looking for. But the games that he's had over the course of these last couple have looked pretty good too. I don't want to sit here and say that he can't do that for an entire season, but I also am looking at like, hey, it was 6 of 21 before he had 5 of 5 in the fourth quarter of this last game.
Yeah,
and that's sort of the Jekyll and Hyde that you're going to get from him and have gotten him through him for his entire career.
I am really glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things talking about when, I think fans understandably, and I guess some members of the media talked about the same thing. They're excited about the clutch jumper, and that matters. And Jamal Murray hitting kind of a mid-range.
And it does
always
matter.
Looks so good.
Let me just hammer that point home real quick. This was a massive shot. This was a massive fourth quarter for Jamal Murray. And I remember back a couple of years ago when he had a very similar start to the season, very similar moments in Portland where, hey, I was actually there for that game. I was able to travel on that one and was able to write a story on how Jamal just didn't feel the same. And then he had that moment and hit a jumper over Jeremy Grant. And holy cow, he started to take off, and the team started to take off, and there was belief, and it permeated throughout the entire organization after that point that they could win a championship because Jamal was back. So I don't know if this is a similar thing. We're going to have to see where Jamal goes from here. I've been burned a couple too many times about expecting him to get to an all-star level and him never really getting to that place.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is at least a previous season where he used a moment like this and it turned into something incredible.
And it doesn't quite matter if Jamal Murray is an all-star or not. That doesn't really mean anything. I mean, is it great for Jamal Murray? Sure. Does it matter to the Nuggets? Not particularly. If that doesn't win them any more games. But that was an important performance. You mentioned he hasn't gotten to 30. He has gotten to 28 twice and 27 once. Of course, 28 in that game against the Kings. But it's worth noting at the same time that he was shot 11 for 26 in that game.
Yeah.
And I get that this happens all the time, right? In every sport, you look at the end of the game and we talk about the clutch moments, and that's really what matters. At the same time, this was a 1-point game. If Jamal Murray goes 13 for 26 at any point in the game, the Nuggets don't have to get that shot or win by 1. So at the same time, the shot percentage is down. That 42 sits about where he has been roughly for the year. As a matter of fact, the numbers this year, 42.5, slightly better than that particular game. 34.8% in three-point percentage, 81.4% on the free throws. Those are all his worst marks since the 2019-2020 season. So this is the worst year we've seen out of Jamal Murray. And granted, I know it's December, but thus far, this is the worst number across the board from a scoring perspective, a field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage that Jamal Murray's had since the 2019-2020 campaign that, of course, was derailed by COVID.
But it also came back. And he
got his reputation.
Back, and he looked pretty darn good in the end of that season. So it's not always a straight line from point A to point B. There are going to be bumps along the way, and there's going to be some highs and lows. There's now, I think I feel very strongly covering Jamal over the course of his career that he's going to have some peaks in the playoffs. He's going to have some valleys in the playoffs. I don't think that playoff Jamal Murray fully exists anymore.
Right.
And I think that
if he ever really did, I mean, that's one of the things too.
It did. That's a problem. There are certain things that he was able to do, getting to spots and being a little bit more physical, that I think has been taken away by injuries a little bit, that I don't think is ever going to be fully granted to him again.
Well, some of the things that he's done as he's aged has been good. For example, rebounds are low, but the steals are at a career high. Yeah. So you're starting to see him adjust his game. Now, not everybody's going to age like LeBron James when the athleticism dropped off, really focused on different parts of his game.
Sure.
That's a unicorn. But yeah, I think the point you're making is important. Jamal Murray is only 27 years old, but he's dealt with a lot of injuries. And the truth of the matter is, we talked about it on this program right here about 2-3 weeks ago. Is it possible we've seen the best of Jamal Murray? And we both agreed that, yeah, it is possible that the best of Jamal Murray we've already seen, because the injuries are going to start becoming more and more difficult as you age. These are cumulative. It makes you more likely to suffer injuries as you go along. It means that when you do run into them, they oftentimes take longer to heal. You obviously find yourself in a spot where they impact you as you go along over the course of your career, even after they heal. So it's possible that the best we've ever seen of Jamal Murray has happened. And as a result, then, is he back? I guess, but he's back as this version of Jamal Murray. And what does this version of Jamal Murray look like to you if everything clicks into place?
I think he's not carrying the bench. That is very clear. The Nuggets have needed somebody to take over the non-Nikola Jokic minutes. And honestly, they've gone back to Jamal lately. And the numbers with Jamal on the second unit are actually not as bad as you would expect.
Oh, you wrote about this on My Life Sports.
They've been more positive than I think people would expect. The numbers and I just wrote about this with Michael Porter specifically. Those have been way worse without Jamal and without Nikola. I think that the ideal role for Jamal, though, is to handcuff him to Nikola Jokic. Those two play their best basketball together. And Nikola Jokic plays his best basketball when Jamal Murray's on the floor. Like, he has different versions and he can get to different places, but Nikola Jokic, they win their minutes by a whole heck of a lot when Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are out there.
Around the league, it's still probably, if not the most feared two-man game in the league, it's awfully close to it. Oh, and obviously a lot of that is Nikola Jokic, who with a lot of competent players could do this, but obviously Jamal Murray has been a perfect foil for him. And now that they've spent enough time together, they're really always on the same wavelength. That's really valuable. It is interesting to see how it goes with the bench. Obviously with the bench, The injury to Deron Holmes was problematic. That was a big challenge. The signing of Dario Saric has not worked by any stretch.
Nope.
The extension given to Zeke Naji has been a disaster.
Yep.
All of these things have obviously really handcuffed the bench. Obviously, you're getting a little bit more out of like a Hunter Tyson of late, but the plan was to draft guys that could play on immediately, right? They drafted older guys with experience who you could plug in immediately, and at least you know if they weren't going to be stars, if the ceiling wasn't all that high, the floor wasn't all that low. But unfortunately, when you miss a couple of times, and it feels like all of them feels like Pickett and Tyson to an extent have been misses. The signing of Najee was a miss. The signing of Saric was a miss. There's still a lot of season that maybe that could turn around. Julian Strother seems like a guy that's got a future in this league, obviously.
Sure.
But when you've missed on all those other ones, obviously where it really strips you down is the bench. And the Nuggets have always had a problem with the non-Jokic minutes. They can get a 10, 12-point lead, and you watch it all bleed out in a matter of minutes, and that's where Jamal Murray's been deployed. But that does take him away from where he's the most effective on the Nuggets, and that's, as you put, handcuffed to number 15.
Yeah, you're going to want somebody who can do that consistently. Denver doesn't have enough spacing with their starting lineup without him. Now, to be fair, Russell Westbrook he's done a really nice job with
I
Jokic.
think so too.
Like that is something that Denver can go to. But why not go to both of them at the same time? Why not have 2 point guards at the same time and be able to play in a couple of different ways where Murray's actually your spacer, Russell Westbrook's your facilitator, and then Nikola Jokic is your scorer on the inside. Like there's so many different ways that they can attack a defense if they have more flexibility to be able to deploy Murray with the starters. I don't know what it's ultimately going to look like. Obviously, there have been some rumors that have come out that we'll talk about later in the show.
Right.
But there's some concerns. I don't want to sit here and say that Jamal Murray is back. That would be too much. What I will say is that there are ways that he can be successful with this team, and the team can win a championship with him, even if he's not performing at like the high standard that a lot of people want him to perform. Like he could average 20.6 assists and be just fine.
Yeah, right. Well, he's rounding into form. I mean, let's look at this in December alone: 19.4 points per game, 45.1 on the field goal percentage, 3.5 on the 3-point.
That's pretty good.
It's only 5 games in December, but it is by far his best month.
It's a good start
thus far. And I think we understand with the injuries and the fact that he's always been a slow starter to the season. If you're seeing it continually ramp up, and we are, that's probably a good sign. Of course, we have to concern ourselves with the minutes. We'll talk more about that as the program goes along too, specifically with regards to potential trades or what the Nuggets might do to be able to fill that out. We'll talk a little bit about the Nuggets offense in general too, because you had a very interesting point on one of your recent pickaxe and rolls about a 3-point shooting league that the Nuggets now live in, and they're trying to do it, well, another kind of way. Is it the right idea? We'll talk about that in a moment, but I want to remind you that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy all those top-notch amenities you expect: the full fitness center, the spa, massage. You want to work out a couple of those extra holiday pounds. I know I'm going to need to do that. I mean, you'll have all that right there available, but there's also Pilates, golf simulator, cold plunge, bowling alley, and licensed childcare center in case, you want someone to take care of the kids while you're doing all that. But what truly sets the DAC apart is that vibrant community. For the century, the member-owned club is all about exactly those people. The members offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. So look at joining the DAC today. Obviously, a terrific holiday gift for anyone who might be looking as well. Visit denverathleticClub.cc for all the details. Ryan Blackburn is here today to talk about the Denver Nuggets as we go with a complete Nuggets show today on a Wednesday. And you brought up a very interesting point, the idea that perhaps looking at the Nuggets offense and saying that maybe it's a dinosaur. I mean, with regard to the fact that this league has become a 3-point centric league. I mean, when you look at even in the early phases of the Warriors dynasty, right, when they were winning in their run, the average number of threes around the league, did they lead that? Yes, they did. Houston was in that mix too. But the drop-off was pretty severe. Now, even those Warriors teams, with the kind of shooting they have from behind the arc, their attempts per game would be in the middle of the league right now. So it's changed dramatically. The pace and space that Daryl Morey once brought to Houston with James Harden has basically taken over the league. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Steve Kerr found a way to turn it into a complete offense. And now you have teams like the Boston Celtics that basically hate shooting anything within the arc. And the Nuggets are dead last in the league, 30.4 3-point attempts per game.
Wild.
But they're hitting at a 38% clip, which ranks 7th.
Yeah, so they they have the flexibility to do it in a couple of different ways, right? Like there's no set way for you to have to score in the NBA. Correlation does not equal causation here. 3-point percentage it's obviously great to have a high 3-point percentage. It's not obviously great to have a high number of 3-point attempts.
So you wouldn't say, like, since the Nuggets are ranked 7th in the league, take 20 more threes a game.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I
think there are fans that look at that and go, well, if they're saying, just shoot more threes.
Now,
but it breaks down offense in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, there are reasons to do it. And I think that teams like the Boston Celtics have figured out a way to continue to space the floor for their stars on a consistent basis. Now, Jason Tatum is also shooting like 9 threes a game himself. So part of that is because he is a wing, a perimeter player. They're surrounding him with other perimeter players. Jokic is a big. Jokic is going to be in the middle of the floor. The best place for him in any offense is at like the free throw line extended, where he's going to be in the middle. He can make all these decisions, but he can also make that 8 to 10 foot shot, the 6-foot floater, the 3-foot jump hook right under the rim. He has the capability to do those things. And you kind of take on the personality of your best player in a lot of ways. And the team, I've made this point before, the team doesn't take bad threes. That's one thing that you can really credit to the Nuggets, is that rather than take bad threes, one of the reasons that they are a great offense still, maybe not great, like in comparison to some of these top-notch juggernauts, but still very, very good.
Their points per game they're ranked 5th in the league.
And in on cleaning the glass, for
top
example,
5.
like cleaning the glass has them as, let me just pull it up right here really
with
quick.
Efficiency and
they are 6th in the NBA in offensive rating. That's good enough to win a championship. There's no doubt about it. By the way, they're 13th in defensive rating. Doesn't feel that way.
It does not.
It does not feel that way at all. But they are capable of scoring with really good teams. And the reason why is because they make good decisions and they pass the ball to their best player a whole heck of a lot. And it doesn't necessarily make it bad for them to not shoot as many threes when they're passing it to the best guy in the world. But it's also like so many of these other teams like Boston and Cleveland and New York, they shoot those threes with abandon because that is what they're supposed to do. They don't have a guy like Nikola Jokic to kind of say, are we sure we want to take this shot?
Yeah, you have to sort of diversify. You basically have to spread that around, whereas the Nuggets are maybe going a little older school idea, not with the threes, but no, we're going to
enter the ball into the post.
Right. We have the best player in the world, and everything goes through him, and you'd be foolish not to do so. I mean, Jokic now with 30.9 points a game, 2nd in the league. That part is impressive, but the even more shocking to me is the fact that the usage rate, if he has everything, he's still shooting, 55% on the season, given the fact that he's also shooting threes at a impressive clip with a great hit rate. So you're talking about a really impressive kind of offense, even though it doesn't look like the other team's offense. And I think that's where people look at this and say, boy, is that a challenge for the Nuggets? Because they don't look like anybody else anymore, hence the dinosaur comment. But we pointed out 5th or 6th in the league, depending on you want to rank offensive rating or just points per game. Their field goal percentage as a team is 3rd. They're top 10 in 3-point percentage. They lead the NBA, and this is one of the things that's been hidden, because as the league goes into 3-point shooting and the Nuggets don't, they lead the NBA in both free throw attempts per game and free throws made per game.
Yeah,
that's an equalizer too.
And
I think to a certain extent it can be more valuable because it alters the way teams have to play when their players get in foul trouble.
Yeah, so it is interesting.
By the way, leading the league in assists to a 30.8, and Jokic is 2nd.
Yeah, that's. Like
I mean, everything else but the number of threes
is
outstanding. It just looks like they're not shooting as many threes as other teams.
And so when you hear some of the trade rumors that, again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show. When you hear some of the trade rumors about them trying to go get Zach LaVine or somebody like that,
right?
A lot of people are going to question that. They're going to think like, why would they do that?
Guy
why would they do that when they're worse on defense and the offense isn't the problem? Well, there's some things that we'll talk about, but one of the reasons to go get a guy like Zach LaVine is to up that 3-point count, to space the floor a little bit more than for Nikola Jokic. I think that we have seen it proven that more spacing around Nikola Jokic is a good thing and less spacing around Nikola Jokic is a bad thing. And if you're looking for both the present and future health of the organization, like having guys that can shoot around him opens up the paint and make things a lot easier for him. One of the things that we've seen with Jokic specifically, he's been Herculean so far this season. There's no doubt about it. He's actually not shooting the ball as efficiently from 0 to 10 feet as you would expect. He has been a little bit less efficient on that front. Teams are crowding him. They're making it very difficult. He's taking a whole bunch of shots that he may not have taken prior to. And the usage rate, of course, is higher, and he's getting a lot of those opportunities. So he's been great as a perimeter shooter when he has a little bit of freedom, a little bit of space. The jumper's really working for him, obviously. But from 0 to 10 feet, he has not been as accurate. And I think part of the reason for that is because teams are collapsing on him so hard. They are making it difficult. He's only shooting, like, I'm looking at it now, 0 to 3 feet, 65.7% from the field. That's not as high. Like, he's usually at 75, like somewhere way higher.
And I think teams have started to defend him slightly differently, just a little bit, because they understand if you let him get close, you're dead.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing a lot more of people collapsing on him late. That could be a slight factor in that. Obviously, Jokic is a maestro. He will find a way to adjust. He will never kick it out. I'm not worried about that. But the idea that the Nuggets are not a 3-point shooting team, and that's a problem. Let me give you an NFL corollary this year for football fans out there, right? The idea is it's a passing league, left and right. And that's something that no one's going to argue. The NFL is a passing league. But let me give you the rushing leaders in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles, likely the favorite in the NFC. The Baltimore Ravens,
pretty good.
Wobbly year, but you could see them go on a playoff run very easily. That's 1 and 2. The surprising Washington Commanders might sneak themselves into the playoffs. They're 3. The Green Bay Packers, another Super Bowl contender out of that same ridiculous division. They're 4th. The Buccaneers are tied with them, and then you have the Detroit Lions.
Pretty good teams.
Those are all teams that are getting it done. There's your top 5 teams on the ground in a passing league. 4 of those 5 are Super Bowl contenders. There's all sorts of ways in sports in which you can do things. It's the Moneyball approach, right? Great. Everyone else is shooting threes. That's fine. The Nuggets can find value in their offense by not shooting threes as long as they're maximizing doing what the other teams are not. And at the moment, at least, it seems that is exactly what they're trying to accomplish. And you're top 5, top 6 defense offense across the board.
Yeah. And so there is a possibility that works. There's definitely a possibility. The Nuggets have, like, they've got a great formula, obviously, with Jokic, with Aaron Gordon on the inside. He hasn't even played a ton so far this season, and they, like we saw it at the beginning of
9 or 10 games that Murray, Gordon, and Jokic have played together all year.
Yeah, they've been pretty good in those games, I'll say.
Yeah.
But you saw it at the beginning of the Sacramento game. There's a reason why the Nuggets jumped out to a 20-point lead in that. It was because they were able to abuse Aaron Gordon, like, at the beginning of that game, just throwing it over the top against teams that are not built to stop interior plays when the center is out on the perimeter, like Domantas Sabonis was guarding Nikola Jokic. So there are ways for Denver to be successful, and buttons that they haven't necessarily pressed as hard as you would hope at the beginning of the season. Right now, Jokic is carrying a lot. Other guys have not been as consistent in that regard. Jamal Murray being one. Aaron Gordon, his when he does shoot has been really good, but he hasn't probably shot enough as this season has worn on. So I'm very curious to see how it evolves, what the offense continues to look like. I'm not for obvious reasons, I'm not as concerned about the offense because they have Nikola Jokic and they will ultimately make it happen. But we've seen teams, particularly the Minnesota Timberwolves, that when you can't score, what does your team look like? And the Nuggets were kind of laid bare in that playoff series because they could not score. What does it look like this year if they can't space the floor, if they can't score, if they can't abuse the paint like they have in previous matchups? That is, I think, a fair question.
Yeah, and I think we have to take a look at then, if you run into teams that are that have one of those effective 3-point shooting nights.
Yeah.
And we've seen that this season. Unfortunately, it just feels like the Nuggets, as they're currently comprised, if a team has a slightly better than average shooting night for 3, the Nuggets are in big trouble, almost no matter what they do. Some of that has to do with the offense, and by nature, when you can get, 1.5 times the points with every bucket, it's hard to maintain a lead for the Nuggets, and it's easy for teams that are behind to catch up. The 3's great at that. It's one of the reasons that Greg Popovich of the Spurs has actually recommended for years to move the line back to make it more of a challenge and to bring more of the mid-range game and spacing into the game. And I think there's maybe some merit to it. as the league continues to migrate in this approach.
Sure.
But the Nuggets are stuck with what they have now. And yes, it seems like it reduces their margin for error. They can be a top 5 scoring team, but if they're a little bit off and the other team, no matter who it is just a little bit better and having a nice night from 3, or the Nuggets aren't closing out like they could be, they find themselves in a heap of trouble in any of those games. And that's where I think when you look at the playoffs and you're looking at eventually getting in there, looking at the best teams that don't have as many off nights and have a lot of games in which they're a little better than average, it's hard to envision the Nuggets being able to get to a championship, maybe Western Conference Finals, who knows? But it's hard to imagine them getting all the way to the top of the mountain again when you have to play 7-game series against all these other teams that give themselves a margin for error in their offense with their three-point shooting that the Nuggets simply don't.
So when the Nuggets, I just looked this up on the spot, when they have fewer than 5 3-pointers made, few like in net than the opposing team. So like, let's say a team makes 15 and they make 10. If the margin is larger than 5, then they are 2-5 on the season. And the 2 wins are against Brooklyn and Utah. That's going to happen. They lost the Minnesota game in particularly because they could not make as many threes as the opposing team. The Clippers game at the second game of the season, same thing. They got blown out by the Knicks. They could not keep up with the Knicks from the perimeter standpoint. They even lost the Washington game with that in mind. Like they have a low floor when they don't make as many threes as the opposing team. Their defense has to be on point with that. But as we've seen, even with this current group, the defense can be pretty shaky when it spirals, it spirals. It does not look good. So I'm very curious to see how it evolves, and if they could kind of bounce that back. But the 3-point thing is a factor to me. It is one of those things that you just make up so much of a difference. Your margin for error is so much higher if you're able to make more threes than the opposing team. Every single night, it just feels like that is always a thing. If I'm gonna run it right now, if they make as many or more threes than the opposing team, they are 6-2.
Yeah, it's like, have they lost? I
Yeah.
mean, right. I mean, how much
they lost.
Talked about how few
they lost one
shoot
game against Dallas,
right?
And then they lost this one of the recent games against the Clippers as well. So like that's the only 2 losses. So they are really good when they can do that. When they can make more threes than the opposing team, it's great. But they just don't do it that often.
Right, and that's obviously the concern. The Nuggets change that, obviously, and stylistically with the guys on the roster right now, there's not much. We understand that unless the bench gets all of a sudden a lot better, and there's no reason to believe that massive in-season growth is going to change.
Right.
I mean, where are there possibilities? You talked about the good play of Russell Westbrook. Could I don't think it'd be the right move, but could the Nuggets move Christian Brown, who's been an efficient shooter, back to the bench and help lead that? Could they continue to keep trying to roll Dario Saric out there and keep doing it until it works? Do you keep banging your head against that wall, hoping the wall falls down? I mean, what can they realistically do before we start digging into trade possibilities?
Well, start shooting better. That'd be great. He's at like we talked about 34.8% from 3 so far this season.
Yeah.
Per 100 possessions, he's taking 7.8 threes per game. That is or 7.8 threes per 100. That is so low in terms of the amount of attempts that he should be taking and the percentage that he should be hitting. That would really change the dynamic on the floor. Aaron Gordon doesn't take enough threes for somebody that shoots 46% from 3. Want to see him continue to do that. He had a clutch one against the Kings in that game on Monday. Jokic is a lower volume 3-point shooter, but he's still taking 5.6 per 100. That's higher than what he's usually at. Christian Brown's down to 3.7 3-pointers per 100. That's like, these guys just have to take more threes within the flow of their starting lineup. Christian's got to be more confident on that front. He is not shooting well in December so far this season. Russell Westbrook's out shooting him from a 3-point attempt standpoint.
And when we know that Westbrook's 3-point shot has been continued to drop, the biggest concern with adding Russell Westbrook is that the shot with age is the legs start to go a little bit, even though he is the Energizer Bunny. It's remarkable. But yeah, the shot started to drop. That was one of the major concerns with signing Westbrook. The fact that Murray's below that is concerning.
Julian Strawther also could get the 3-point attempt up. Like he's one that
Glad you brought that up.
I am always of the opinion that if Julian is driving, it better be for a good reason. He's shooting 39% from three. I want to see him continue to light it up, light the net on fire with as many threes as you're taking. I know that he wants to take good shots, and the team wants him to take good shots too. Like, that's the one. If you're looking for guys that can really up their attempts throughout the season, he's definitely one for me.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look and see what the Nuggets could also do on the trade side of things. Obviously, there's a little bit of smoke coming around. We'll talk about Zach LaVine in just a moment. Want to remind you that on Wednesdays, we call it Wellness Wednesday right here at Mile High Sports, because mental health is health. And we have our friend, Dr. Rick Perea, who's on the programming here. You get a chance on his Wellness Wednesday program to get your checkup from the neck up from the good doctor. Check out everything they can do for you over at think14u.org. That's think14u.org. Dr. Rick has worked with the Broncos during their Super Bowl season, Super Bowl 50. They worked with the Colorado Rockies when they were in the playoffs recently. That actually happened, and even more recently than the Broncos made the playoffs. I know it doesn't feel like it. Worked with them as well as a bunch of other NFL teams, individual players, NFL Hall of Famers, and he can help you. You don't have to be a Hall of Famer. You don't have to even be an athlete. Parent of an athlete, or just someone who your job would like to do a little bit better. What you can do, we can always use a reframe, right? We can always take a look at ourselves and figure out what we can do to make ourselves a little bit better. And that's what Dr. Rick and his team do. So check out everything that they can do for you right there at think14u.org. That's think1, the number, 4u.org. And right here on Wellness Wednesdays, get your checkup from the neck up with Dr. Rick Perea and his staff from Think1, a really entertaining program as well. So make sure you check it out right here on the Mile High Sports Network. Well, let's dig right into it. Where there is smoke, there is sometimes fire, but obviously when you're talking about the NBA and the complications of making trades, Ryan, there are lots of reasons to be intrigued by the news that the Nuggets and the Bulls maybe have a little bit of started the idea of a dance partner. When the Bulls signed Zach LaVine to his deal, that was considered to be around the league. They were like, ooh, that's a big deal. That's an untradeable contract.
Still a big number.
Still a big number. When Michael Porter Jr. got his extension for the Nuggets, a lot of people said that was too early. That's nearly an untradeable contract. Well, the one thing you can do in the NBA, as long as they're close enough, is you can trade untradeable contracts for the other. The matchup for the salary on those guys is pretty close. The Nuggets would have to slide in their fifth highest paid player on the team, Zeke Naji, in order to make it work, and probably have to slide picks over as well.
Maybe.
We'd have to see.
We'll see. Those conversations are going to be very
the Nuggets picks, obviously, that there's only a handful of them available. There's a lot of conditions behind them. Yeah, which is conditional this 2038 or whatever it's going to be. So it's complicated. But when you look at the idea of Zach LaVine, turn 30 in just a little bit here, and you look at what he does, I will say right here, and I know you and I talked a little bit before the show, and we kind of disagree on it. I am not entirely sure what Zach LaVine brings that Michael Porter Jr. doesn't. Porter Jr. is taller. Porter Jr., despite the fact, he could play a little more to his size. I get that. But he is a pretty good rebounder. He definitely has a knack for it when he focuses on it. I think his defensive effort has consistently gotten better, and he's scoring and I apologize because I actually said Porter Jr. is the third leading scorer on the Nuggets earlier. He is not. He's second, slightly ahead. 0.1 ahead of Jamal Murray. Could be over as soon as tomorrow, but nevertheless, you're talking about your second leading scorer and a guy that potentially still, I guess, has maybe a little bit of upside as his game rounds into form. Zach LaVine, I think, is who he is at this point, almost 30. And the scoring to me is more or less a wash. I know that LaVine does it differently and can be slightly more efficient at times, but we also know that Porter Jr. can be one of the most efficient three-point shooters in the league when we're talking about a Nuggets team that doesn't shoot threes very well. So all this idea about Porter Jr. and Naji for LaVine, why would that benefit the Denver Nuggets other than maybe just shifting guys in the positions just because you need a different look?
So remember when I talked about those non-Jokic minutes earlier?
Right, yes.
Remember when I talked about what Porter was doing in those particular minutes and just how that has looked? The actual number on that, for what it's worth, with Jokic and Murray off the floor and Porter on, the Nuggets have a 79 offensive rating. 79 is really bad.
Can you explain to people who don't maybe understand the offensive rating in a nutshell?
It is just points per 100 possessions that you're scoring. This is how frequently
it's an efficiency metric.
100 would be bad. 79 is way worse. It's one of those where if you are an average offense right now, you're probably at about 112. That's with a lot of the starters on. So I'm willing to be flexible with that and say, okay, you probably just have to cross the century mark to stay afloat. The Nuggets are not even doing that. And it's not all Porter's fault. He's not the guy who's controlling the offense most of the time. Russell Westbrook is controlling the offense most of the time, but he's also a minimum contract guy.
Right.
So like expecting him to do much more, he's been great for the Nuggets, especially for what they have asked him to do. But you can't ask him to be the leading scorer on your team. Especially in those units. Michael Porter, for as good of a fit as he has been with the Nuggets in various moments, still kind of gets out of the way a lot of the time when the going really gets tough.
Okay.
And like I have pointed out the clutch shooting numbers. Not that he can't shoot in the clutch, but that the Nuggets don't go to him in the clutch. He has like an 8% usage rate in the clutch.
So is that a function of Porter Jr.'s play? Is he in the wrong place? Do the Nuggets, these other players on the floor, do they not trust him? Or is it simply that the best two options by and large to score in the clutch are Jokic and Murray, and because there's so much better options that guys like Porter Jr. and Gordon are obviously going to be below that?
It's the combination of both. Denver is hardwired, obviously, where Jokic and Murray are going to be their guys. That's always been the case for them. But it's also partially because of Michael Porter's skill set, where he can't impact those minutes as often because he still struggles to dribble. Like he still struggles to handle that ball pressure.
Creating his own shot, it can be a problem still. That's fair.
So often, all you want is just the ability to handle ball pressure, the ability to go off the dribble and create something. And Porter, despite the fact that he has a pretty solid mid-range percentage, that he can do some of those things kind of within the flow of a game, he's not somebody that you're ever going to trust to do that on a consistent basis in a very important moment. And I think back to last year in the playoffs when he averaged 11 points per game, and like shot 35% from the field and 25% from three.
It was abysmal
in that series against Minnesota. Like he got locked by Jaden McDaniels. It's not to say that.
And Jaden McDaniels locks a few guys.
He's a great defender.
Yeah, right.
But
to be
it's
fair,
not to say that Zach LaVine wouldn't get locked either.
Right.
But I look at the way that they guarded Jamal Murray with Anthony Edwards and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and were just applying as much ball pressure as they could. Denver couldn't get into their offense, Sean. They needed somebody who could initiate things. They needed somebody who could create off the dribble, who could run the two-man game with Jokic. And if somebody is like having trouble with that, if it's Murray's having trouble with that, they needed somebody else to do it. KCP couldn't do it.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why he's gone.
There really hasn't been a lot of guys who can dribble drive.
Right.
When it's necessary. Aaron Gordon at times along the baseline, but it's obviously not what he's best suited to do. As you pointed out, KCP wasn't that guy. Michael Porter Jr. is not that guy. Zach LaVine can do that. Now, he's not as adept a passer in the drive and kick game as, say, like a Russell Westbrook, but you still have to respect his ability. And you're right. When you're locking down someone like Jamal Murray, Zach LaVine changes that. Let's say hypothetically they bring LaVine in, and let's say it costs them. Let's worry about the picks.
Sure.
Najee and Porter. LaVine is not going to probably replace Porter unless the Nuggets are going to go very small consistently.
I think he might.
They'd have to go really small.
Do they really? Is it really that small in the NBA today? Is it really? Because it's Aaron Gordon at the 4.
You'd continue to go with Murray, Brown, LaVine.
I think it's justifiable, if I'm being honest. Like, how many teams are they going to run into and be like, oh, they're too big for us? Like, how many? Just look at it around the NBA right now. Is it Oklahoma City? Is it Dallas? Is it Minnesota?
Okay.
Like, what are we doing here?
Well,
Like,
it would be Boston, but I guess you'd worry about that. You'd worry about
really?
You'll worry about it in the finals, and I think Nuggets fans would take that.
What is Michael Porter going to be like matching up with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and locking them down?
Right.
No.
Well, that's the problem. Is we talked about the Nuggets. They're not going to lock anybody down. Even if you like the defensive ratings. Right. Yeah. Those are problems you deal with after this is what the Broncos are doing, right? People are looking at the Broncos. What about the playoff matchups?
How do they win a championship?
Like playoff matchups. Just get in. I'm not trying to Jim Mora this, but like just get into the playoffs and be happy you're there. It'd be great if you hold that 6 seed. You don't have to play the Bills or the Chiefs in the first round. But at that point, look, just get there and worry about the details later. It's been 9 years. But for the Nuggets, you worry about getting that far when you get that far. That's not a concern. The problem now is, as it stands right now, the Nuggets are 5th. They're teetering between being near the top of the West and a play-in team. And I think if this team gets stuck having to go into the play-in, it makes the road really, really long. So yeah, I don't know. I am concerned about the size. I'm just concerned about a guy 6'5" playing your 3.
They can go to Peyton Watson a little bit more frequently if they have LaVine in there instead of Porter. That's
Okay.
one thing that,
And even though he's shorter than Porter by a couple inches, obviously a vastly better defender.
yeah, like, well, I
Right.
mean, there's
not
no
even close.
question. There's no
Right.
question at that point. But the thing that people have to remind themselves about is that you've got your kind of pillar guys that are going to play a bunch of minutes. Jokic will play a lot of minutes. Gordon will play a lot of minutes. Brown will play a lot of minutes. LaVine would play a lot of minutes. Murray will play a lot of minutes.
Right.
After that, you're just filling in gaps. You're trying to figure out, okay, who are we going to go to on a consistent basis? Well, Peyton Watson's a guy that I think you could go to pretty consistently. Russell Westbrook has shown that he can be a guy that you go to consistently. I still have some concerns like in the playoffs when they roll around, but like he's earned the right to at least wait until that happens before really worrying about it. After that, like, what do they need some backup center minutes.
Yes.
That is a thing.
Yes. And that one, look, I get that people are all over Calvin Booth. I mean, I see our comments as we're speaking.
He's
all over
trying.
Calvin Booth. But Calvin, I will defend this. Yeah. I don't know how it would have turned out at the NBA level right off the bat, but I loved Deron Holmes coming out of college. Yeah. I loved the pick when they were getting close to that time frame. Like, please let Holmes be there. You're talking about a guy that was all conference defensive player of the year, that led that conference in rebounds and block shots. So I think they went for it. And then the terrible luck is that the Achilles gets torn in the very first summer league game. That one's not on Calvin Booth. I think he actually drafted the right guy who fit needs, and he got hurt. Okay, that happens. And one of the things in the comments that I think is interesting, that was the idea that our man Dejan here in the comments pointed out is concern. Dayon. Okay, yeah. Sorry. As a guy with a Slavic last name, I should have been better at that. That's on me. But it is LaVine's potential availability as well. He's had an injury history that is significant and oddly, maybe even more recent than Michael Porter Jr.'s.
Yeah, that's the thing that you look at with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's hurt right now.
He is hurt right now. I think he would magically get better if he came to Denver. That's part of the thinking that I have here. I think.
Do you think then that's because the Bulls believe they're close to a trade?
No. This is not imminent. I will say that, like, if this were to happen, I don't think it happens until at least January. I think that this is something where the Nuggets don't want to make this deal. I've actually got that on pretty good information.
I think they if they're trading from a position of weakness.
Yeah.
And everyone around the league knows it.
Yeah.
And that's not
it's one of the
you
reasons
don't make
why
those trades unless you have to.
One of the reasons why this report came out in the first place was that teams are understanding that the Nuggets are in a pretty difficult position. They're stressed a little bit about this.
And you may be going after one of the toughest contracts in the league to trade.
Yeah. So like that's, but hey, they have to go after distressed assets because they don't have assets in the first place. So I think everybody understands that. They're connecting the dots. It's one of the reasons why Brandon Ingram also was out there as an idea. I floated this idea, or not floated, but I've bandied about this idea as well. The Atlanta trade.
This is the one I like.
Yeah. So
this is the one I like.
There's a couple of different ways that if you're going to make a trade, it doesn't have to be for LaVine. I think that they're a good, like they're a great team with LaVine if they do that, because I think LaVine is vastly underrated by the entire Nuggets fan base because everybody's sentimental about Porter. But I think they are. Like you should see my mentions, brother.
Okay.
It's pretty bad.
Okay. Well.
But if you make the Atlanta deal, if you could come up with some sort of concept with the Atlanta deal and say, okay, Denver's interested in DeAndre Hunter.
Right.
Denver would certainly love to have a guy like Onyeka Okongwu as their backup center. Like he would be able to play and do some things immediately. And then could you get Bogdan Bogdanović if you add in a couple of you add in Dario Saric and Zeke Naji on the other side? Maybe you add in Julian Strother in order to facilitate.
See, that's the problem. You might have to, because look, everyone acts like it's NBA 2K when you're trying to make trades, right? I mean, well, it's okay. We can give you the guys that we don't want and that we don't play, and you'll give us guys that will play. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you have to grease the wheels.
Absolutely, and that's whether it's in picks or giving up a player that you do like. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about a very difficult contract to trade to Michael Porter Jr., who some people around the league believe if he hasn't peaked, he might be close. We know what he is. And you're asking people to take on Saric, who doesn't play.
He can play, and he'd be one of those guys that it seemed like Atlanta would be like, okay, you know, we could.
Well, and they could utilize him differently because when Saric had to start here and there, he can be useful. He's obviously the bench fit has been complicated.
Right.
But again, you're talking about teams, and in Zeke Najee's case, you're talking about a guy who's played 79 minutes this year while healthy. You'd have to be able to say, if you were trading with the Nuggets, and this would be from the perspective of a team that's trading with the Nuggets, we think the Nuggets coaching staff doesn't know what to do with Zeke Naji. We think we can do better. Well, how many coaching staffs at this point, unless you have a ring on your finger and a whole bunch of wins like that, how many can really look at themselves in the mirror and say, yeah, we have a better coaching staff than the Nuggets? So Najee's hard to trade.
You see the way that things have gone with Denver's backup center over the course of these last few years. And
it's been like the Broncos at right guard, just keep rolling them in.
Well,
right?
it's not
Try
just
somebody
that.
new.
It's that when they're out, they're better. Isaiah Hartenstein is a great example.
Yeah.
You could point to Jay Huff.
Yep.
You could point to a variety of different players.
And I guess that oddly, that's
Yusuf Nurkic as
isn't that a weird sales pitch? Well, geez, if you're Calvin Booth, you got to call it. Well, we're not really good at using backup centers. So Zeke Naji is probably better than you think because we're not good at utilizing them. That's a weird sales pitch, but I guess it might work.
Calvin Booth would say that against Michael Malone. He would absolutely do that.
You might have to if you're going to make the deal. I mean, that's the problem, right? You're trying this is rummage sale stuff.
Bottom line,
expensive rummage sale stuff, as it turns out.
Bottom line, though, there is a reason why this report came out when it did. Denver is exploring possibilities. Right. They know that they are not good enough. I believe that they are not good enough. Nuggets fans are still on the fence.
And the Bulls have been trying to move on from that LaVine contract. Yeah. They had the buyer's remorse not long after.
So I think that there is some serious dot connecting going on in some of these reports for sure. But I also think that there's some real stuff like the LaVine and like that interest is real from Denver. This is
probably real from Chicago.
This is not something that is like just contrived by people. This is happening.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I agree with you. They're going to wait till January. I think they have to explore a lot of options. This is not, as we're talking about, a position where the Nuggets are trading for strength. They're just not. And obviously, you go back to the old rule in any trade. If you got the best player in the trade, you won the trade. So if the Nuggets truly believe Zach LaVine's the best player and they get it done however they get it done, I guess that's fine. But to get it done, you have to give away either something you want, or you have to be able to have a tremendous sell job on the things that don't work for you and basically say, we don't know what to do with it, but we bet you can handle it better. So it's fraught, it's complicated. And that leads us in, I guess, to what we want to talk about last. And because I agree with you, I think it's not a trade that's imminent at the moment. I think they're going to look at a lot of potential trades. You talked about Brandon Ingram. I think Ingram actually would be I like Ingram better as a fit.
Man, I hate it.
Really, I like Ingram better as a fit than
I think it's so dumb
than LaVine. But the problem, there's another issue too with Ingram's in the final year of his contract, and even just losing him into free agency doesn't help the Nuggets on the aprons as much as you think. So that's fraud as well. There are a lot of complications to it. But let's take a look. Let's look at the crystal ball, Ryan, and let's look at the Nuggets at the All-Star break, which all of a sudden is only 2 months away. Not that far, right?
Gosh.
So let's take a look at the All-Star break. We know that Jokic leads the league in minutes. Not a surprise, but Jamal Murray is 6th and Christian Brown is 12th. That's 3 of your 5 starters in the top 12 in the entire NBA in minutes. I think you could still legitimately, even the way that the Nuggets season ended last year with the Timberwolves, as disappointing as it was, it's easy to forget they had a significant second half lead in the decisive game. Right. And we basically watched in real time as the Denver Nuggets starters ran out of gas. They're being taxed at a higher rate right now than they were last year, and the bench is worse. So how do you avoid that fate? What can they realistically do besides a trade to bring these starters' minutes down? Because you've already seen what happens if you don't.
So I've been on this for a while, like even in the offseason when Denver was building their lineup. And then when Calvin Booth said 9 real guys at media day, that was at a big alarm bell for me because, okay, well, 9 real guys are not playing 82. 9 real guys are certainly not playing that amount of minutes. And Denver has to find a way to expand their rotation. They have to find a way to trust a few more people. They've got to find a way. And they've gotten Aaron Gordon some rest, although it came with an injury. Right. They've gotten Jamal Murray some rest, although it came with an injury. They've got Nikola Jokic some rest, although it came with a baby.
Right.
Nikola, get right on it, man.
It's fair noticing that rest is real, though. And even though it's nursing an injury, that's not great. But if you're going to have these kind of injuries that aren't season-ending type of things, and you can still weather the storm and be 14-10 like they are, and they did get some time away, that does add up a little bit as well. But obviously it's still a major factor here, and you don't want to have to look for injuries to find a way to improve it. So,
Of course not.
talking about Calvin Booth's thing, well, now this to me goes a little bit to Michael Malone, because Calvin Booth can't make Michael Malone trust more guys. Calvin Booth can't say, you know what, we need 10 minutes from Zaire Sarge tonight. I don't even know what you're going to do, good, bad, or indifferent, but I need you to go out and give me 10 minutes. And that's a Michael Malone decision. And to protect his starters, he's probably going to have to do that. And I think if there's one thing that's very clear about Michael Malone, he really, really, really doesn't want to.
Yeah. And I don't blame him.
I don't either.
It's hard to.
I don't either, but
hard to really justify.
But you have the short-term vision, you have the long-term vision.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to lose a battle in order to win the war? And that's sort of the problem. You may have to do, again, I'll refer to Greg Popovich again. When he sort of pioneered the load management idea, he sort of understood on a lot of these back-to-backs things. The guy's going, I'm not playing Tim Duncan. I'm not going to play Manu Ginobili. And you know what? We're probably going to lose to this terrible team that we should have otherwise no business losing to. But I don't care, because my objective is to win a title. And to do that, I've got to be able to make sure my guys are hitting at their peak during the playoffs. That, to me, seems to be maybe the final step in Michael Malone's evolution. And I don't think it's quite there.
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a him problem. I just don't think that he's been given the pieces to make it happen. And like how many shooters do they have on their roster?
Right.
4. Like they don't have a lot of guys that can do the things that you're asking to do to make it functional, to put them into a position where it actually works. Dario Saric has not worked. And DeAndre Jordan's been a much better center so far this season. And by the way, shout out to DeAndre Jordan. He has stayed ready. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's awesome, because he's not. Like there are so many problems that, like, at this stage of his career that he has in
that's 10 minutes a game he's eating up that the Nuggets would have no other option. And I actually think the Jordan in his minutes has given the Nuggets a significant boost. There's a physicality there. The effort is there. They see him out there. He's basically sort of a coach on the bench and a coach in the locker room. He's out there hustling as best as he can and playing physical basketball. It makes it a lot harder for your younger teammates to not try to match that energy. I think there's value to
that. I think everybody wants the best for DeAndre Jordan, the way that he has contributed, the way that he's been a leader. He has been so important to the Nuggets behind the scenes that everybody just wants to see him have some success. It is like Udonis Haslem in that regard in Miami. But I do think that there's only so much that he can do. There's only so much that any of these guys can do. You have to have more players that are capable. I hope that Trey Alexander gets converted into a full-time contract so that he can play a little bit. I hope that they can kind of tighten up the edges of the roster a little bit. I mean, Hunter Tyson is starting to figure some stuff out. So maybe that is one guy that they could go to on a more consistent basis. But just the way that they run their roster, the way that they run their rotations, they've got to find more ways to get creative with some of these lineups. That is a Michael Malone thing, where he likes to run 4 starters for the majority of the first and the third quarter, and then 1 starter with the bench. And that automatically gets you to 9 players, and you're not really playing many more than that.
Right.
I think that I said this before the season. I think that's got to change. He's got to go with 10. The problem is you can't get to 10 the way that they've been playing. And like they're 14-10. Like they're on a 3-game winning streak. So like they were at 11-10. Things were looking pretty dire. And they've climbed out of the pit of misery, at least for a little bit here. And then maybe this is a great opportunity for them to try to get back to that, because they do play a pretty easy schedule over the course of these next few weeks. So this would be the opportunity, in theory, for them to try to get Jokic some fourth quarters off, for them to try to get Murray some fourth quarters off, things like that. And then you kind of expand your rotation a little bit, play those bench minutes for a little bit longer, rather than playing Jokic 37 minutes a night.
14-10 is not all that impressive. It's not where the Nuggets want to be, but they do have a winning record at home. They have a winning record on the road. They have a winning record in the division. Not that matters anymore in the NBA, and a winning record in the conference. And as we've talked about, a top 5-6 offense in the league.
Right.
Why does it feel like the sky's falling?
Because you know it when you see it. You know it when you see when a team has championship gear, and they don't have a championship gear right completely. Now. Like there is something that you see from a team where they're just inevitable for the opposing team. And I will say, like, they're the only team that's won a game where they've been down by 10 in the last 4 minutes of a game, and they've won 2 of them. So like they do have that gear specifically when the going gets tough, they can get going. Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, they can do that for sure. But I also just know in the heart of hearts that I have that this is not going to be enough. There needs to be something else. And whether that's a Zach LaVine trade, I don't care if it's the Zach LaVine trade or not. But like I just see it right now and I see where Denver's at and I just see something missing. And I don't know how to fully parse that with where they are because they can be a good team and still get to 50 wins. And maybe they're good enough that Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther and Christian Brown have taken these minutes over the course of 82 games and are just better players by the playoffs and ready to go. And maybe that is the factor that I'm looking for. But I don't know if I see that happening within a year.
Yeah. Anytime you bet on a whole bunch of young players simultaneously elevating their game and reaching somewhere close to their ceiling,
That's tough.
Yeah, what you end up with is the Colorado Rockies. You don't want that. But that's what they believe every single year, and that's what happens.
Yeah, going dark here in the studio.
I'm just saying that's the worst case scenario. That's not going to happen to the Nuggets. But I'm saying when you bet that a whole team of guys is going to all of a sudden get better simultaneously, you end up doing that, and the only thing you have going for you is a party deck. Let me give you a comparison for another Colorado team, the Colorado Avalanche, who in the recent weeks traded away both their starting goalies. No team in history has ever traded away the two goalies they broke camp with in the first 30 games of the season. The Avs did. And the idea was they have a core of Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and Cale Makar, all guys who are going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. And they basically decided doing something is simply better than doing nothing.
Sure.
When you know doing nothing isn't going to work. Are the Nuggets there yet? Or does it just feel like we have to wait it out a little bit longer? Because I can see a scenario in which doing something is probably the right choice, even if it doesn't end up making the team a lot better, even if it backfires. But it feels like when you have a guy on pace for his 4th MVP award, the best player on the planet playing at his absolute peak, reinventing the game of basketball on a nightly basis. And if you look at this team and say, what you're seeing and what I'm seeing, you don't have enough. You can't just let one of those years just go by the wayside. You can't. They may not be there yet. How far are they away from having to make a move simply to make a move?
It's tough because Jokic is playing at obviously such a high level that you want to put him into a position where he can showcase that in the playoffs and not be overburdened by like not having enough around him. You want him to feel like there are answers that the team can go to and the team is trying actively to assist him in that front.
And not have to hit the summer averaging nearly 40 minutes a game.
He's getting kind of frustrated.
Yeah. You can see it.
You can see it in the eyes, you can see it in the responses, you can see it in the voice. Like there's plenty of things that kind of lead me to believe that he's getting a little bit more frustrated than he has sort of let on publicly. But he's also like said, hey, guys could get benched like in my country for playing the way that or ultimately operating in the way that things have happened, especially after that Washington loss. So I think that everybody's woken up. I think everybody understands that it's go time at this point. And this is the time where Denver starts to show who they are. This is the time where Denver starts to show, okay, do we have that gear? And it's why I think that they're going to wait until January. I think you want to see them play this out a little bit. Is this 3-game winning streak that they're currently on real? Is this Jamal Murray getting back fully on track? Is this Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter fully locking in as the each being a capable 3rd best player on a team when they're 3rd and 4th? I think that there are reasons to believe that they have the championship formula that is still intact and can still do their stuff. There's also reasons to believe that this is not the same group.
Yeah.
And that this is a slightly worse group than they've been. So I don't know the answer. I wish I had a better answer for you. This is me trying to be faithful to a group that won a championship 2 years ago with the same group. It's not quite the same, but the pieces that they've exchanged out should not be as impactful as they seemingly have been.
We'll find out, obviously, how the Nuggets continue to go, of course, over through the rest of this month, and then we'll find out when and if they eventually make a trade. And you're right, looking at the comments, there are a lot of people that don't want MPJ traded under any circumstances. And
I know I know our fans.
It's polarizing, right? It is. And the idea that I've seen a lot of mentions of chemistry, right? But the chemistry with these guys matters. Well, that helps. That helps. But how many times have we watched, and I get that only now since the last collective bargaining agreement, which helped get the Nuggets to a championship, and also now puts them in aprons where it makes it very hard to retain it. You have Milwaukee win a title, you have the Nuggets win a title, you have Phoenix come close to winning a title. You're getting the kind of parity that the NBA has been looking for its entire history, especially since the David Stern administration. But the idea that chemistry matters. Prior to this, you got a whole bunch of super teams, a whole bunch of mercenaries pop up. They had no chemistry. They were just really good, and that would work as well. It wasn't going to work at Phoenix last year because those guys were old and all injury prone. But for the most part, chemistry matters. It does, and it matters in clutch moments. But you have to get to the moments in which they matter, and they don't matter. That doesn't come up in every single solitary game. That's so I don't want people to overrate that. Yeah. What basically wins is talent. Chemistry helps. Coaching helps. You know what helps the most? Have the better team with the better players.
I also don't know if the chemistry is awesome right now.
Doesn't look like it, does it?
I know that
sometimes guys can stay together, and when things start to go a little south, things change.
It's not like Mike is the problem. Nobody.
He's your second leading scorer. He hasn't really done anything wrong.
Yeah, nobody in their right mind is saying that Mike is the problem. It's just that sometimes things don't fully work out, and the team is searching for ways, and they can't trade Jamal, and they can't trade Aaron, and they're not trading Nikola, and so it's just a process of elimination kind of thing here. I hate that he is the victim of this numbers game, because if Denver hadn't given Jamal the extension in the offseason, we might be talking about Zach LaVine for Jamal Murray.
Right.
Like that might honestly be what we're looking at. I don't know whether that's ultimately what they were done. Like, I don't know if this was something that they would even consider at that point. But what I do know is that Mike is the odd man out purely by circumstance, not because of anything he himself has done.
Yeah, it is a difficult situation the Nuggets find themselves in. And it is funny because, depending on how you look at it, it can be glass half full or glass half empty. As we pointed out, they're 2.5 games out of second place in the Western Conference. They're also 2 games out of missing the playoffs entirely. And that creates some of the challenges.
The Western Conference, man.
Yeah, it is. It is all stacked up.
I saw a graphic that the Eastern Conference had 14 of the 15 remaining easiest schedules in the NBA this year.
Yeah, because it's all each other.
Screw that.
Yeah. I mean, you're at a point, you already basically made divisions irrelevant. Maybe just start making conferences irrelevant, which has been actually some discussions in the NBA. The idea of just saying the heck with it. It's not like it used to be. Everyone gets on planes and flies everywhere. Maybe you need to seed the thing 1 to 16 and rock and roll and go. I think there are fans that would like that as well. We'll find out how it all shakes out over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, you want to follow Ryan Blackburn if you're not already. Make sure you check out everything he writes on Mile High Sports. Terrific. I think Danny even put best chart game in Denver for the minutes chart down on the board.
Hell yeah.
That is correct. There you go. So Ryan Blackburn, obviously our lead writer for Mile High Sports, the Nuggets, and the host of the terrific Pick, Axe, and Roll podcast. If you haven't subscribed to that, you need to absolutely do that. Must listen for all Nuggets fans. So always good to talk to you on the show. And
thanks,
let's try to do this once a month. Let's sit down. Let's do a Nuggets only.
We definitely have to. There's going to be a couple of pretty big days for the Nuggets coming up. They're playing on Christmas is going to be a big deal. They're going to have the trade deadline in February. Like there are going to be some major moments for the Nuggets coming up in the next couple of months. So we'll be able to talk about plenty.
Yeah, and it's okay, that they missed out on the NBA Cup. Don't worry about it. It won't at all. Let Milwaukee.
Milwaukee had a good time.
Yeah, they can hang its banner, enjoy. Great, no big deal. Nuggets have eyes on a bigger prize, and we'll see how it goes for sure.
I wish that they had eyes on the NBA Cup. That would have been sick.
Oh, goodness gracious! Oh my gosh, we'll save that one for the next time for sure. Appreciate everybody who ends up watching the program, whether you're watching it live or whether you're consuming it, whenever it's convenient for you. That's why we make it exactly the way we can make it, so you can catch it when you want to catch it. Danny Bailey's the man that makes all of it work. For Ryan Blackburn, Pick, Axe, and Roll podcast, lead writer at Mile High Sports. I'm Sean Drotar. For all of us at Mile High Sports, thanks for watching Mile High Sports today. We'll catch you tomorrow.